Next question then, for folks who have added automation to brownfield networks, what worked, what didn't work, and do you have any tips to pass on? I think a lot of folks, the presumption is most folks are starting with brownfield and they've got some component they want to add to. So hopefully a lot of people have done this at least on a small scale. But let's give some advice to people. Phil, you raised your pinky finger on this question a little bit, so why don't I throw this out at you,
Sure.
and then I'm gonna harass the other people too.
Starting with number 3, any tips to pass on? Start small in a corner of the network. Ask your boss if you can automate a closet of switches. And when I say automate, you can begin with things like pulling information and not necessarily pushing configuration. You do something like that, you can start to show value to network dinosaurs that are reluctant to, to make changes in the paradigm of how they do networking and network operations. So start small, and it's also easier to do just because your inventory files are little and things like that. So that's just one little tip that has worked for me.
Chris, have you spent any time here and have any thoughts?
No, I'm afraid I have nothing to add on this one.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
I don't know. For me, it's it echoes what Phil is saying. Find that small closet where the blast radius is tiny and isn't going to wreck your network if you misconfigure something on your automation scripts. But at least for me, it was I've now spent excuse me, probably the better part of a year trying to get either up to speed on the tasks that I would need to do, and even trying to get colleagues and my own teams and management to start to understand, hey, we can lighten our load if we can start to automate things. So there seems to be there's almost got to be a grassroots effort while you're training yourself if this is all kind of new to you.
Yeah, you definitely need buy-in from the boss, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I really believe that like I said, start small, and I think Brian seemed to agree, but start with pulling info. Don't push config yet. If you're starting something, it's brownfield, don't just write a script and then start, configuring BGP communities willy-nilly. Don't do that. Start by pulling information, interface statistics, something that's valuable to you and your team, of course. That way, number one, you can show value and get buy-in, but also that's a great, there's value to that in the first place, grabbing interface statistics from all your WAN links and trunk ports, things that you might not be able to monitor very easily. So start with something like that. Don't think that you have to start by and in that process, you're going to have to build inventory files and maybe various different modules that you're using, so you can be more object oriented in how you do things. So I can't think of the euphemism, like, what is it? Don't bite the whole cow or whatever. You know what I mean? Just take small chunks at a time, starting with pulling information, starting with one closet, and because you're going to have to build a lot of that back-end infrastructure to do large-scale automation anyway. That takes a long time.
All right, I'll share a few thoughts here from my own experiences. Things that don't work: if you are used to doing things for yourself and not for the benefit of the whole team, it's convenient for you, so you do a little script on your own little Linux workstation or something, and it works for you. That's probably going to be it works for you, but it doesn't really work for the team. And what you're trying to do with automation, certainly in a modern context, is get everybody on board, and you're actually trying to shape culture and workflow and processes. And so the way to do that is you build a tool, whether that's a script or something more complex than that, and make it usable for everyone that's on your team. Don't just do it in your own little microcosm and have a script that is so specific to you that you're the only one that can understand how this thing works and what it's supposed to do. That's not really the way that you want to go. It might be convenient for you, but it's not really solving a problem. It's not changing your CLI culture, if you will. That's a major thing. Another thing that works is documentation, training, lunch and learn, communication. I know that's kind of not the intent of the question there, because you're looking for like, oh, what sort of, specific, nerd knob kind of things worked. But honestly, what makes automation work for a team is sharing with the team what you're trying to get done and how that's all supposed to work, and getting everyone on the same page is pretty critical. Documenting how it works is pretty critical. If you've got a wiki, if you've got, whatever, God help you, SharePoint, whatever you've got that is your information sharing tool within your organization, you should be right on that, writing, sharing, talking to other people about what you're doing and why, and being very open about it. Keeping it all to yourself and so on it doesn't scale, it doesn't work well, it doesn't get other people engaged and on board with it. And you really do want that. You want other people on board with that, because you've got a big mindset trust problem to overcome. Everyone's used to logging into a single device and changing the thing, and then off you go. That's an issue when you're trying to do automation and have everything be more predictable in that way. Another thing that's important is setting goals. Why are you doing this? If one of the reasons is because people make mistakes, and so we want to automate to reduce the number of mistakes that are being made, okay, you've got to get buy-in from everybody that this is the way they're going to do business. So this goes, actually, I got an example that goes way back in time. We were using a product called Voyance that was not really an automation tool, but it was a way you could at least bundle up a change that was common to a lot of devices and push it all out the door. So it wasn't intelligent. It was a batching tool, effectively, is what it really was. You'd build a chunk of code and then send it out there, and there were some approval capabilities to it. When you use a tool like that, you have to insist that everybody uses that tool and uses it in the same way. And you can't have some cowboy off in the corner going, screw that, I don't want to use that process. I don't like it. It makes me, whatever. People don't like things sometimes. You got to get everybody on board. You've really got to insist that everyone's bought in and using this thing, or it is going to be a struggle to end up with a consistent feel to the network. Yet another tip that already has been iterated, but I've heard this we just heard it from Anuta. We've heard it from Glue Networks, or Glueware. They're Glueware now. Have all said this, and we've said it individually. Start small. You're not going to walk into your brownfield environment and throw an automation tool and insist everybody use it day one. It's going to come in chunks. Today, the thing that we're going to tackle is NTP configuration, and make sure that every device on the network is using the same NTP configuration. That's very small. It's pretty low risk. You can kind of get a feel for the tool and how it's going to work out for you. And then over time, add more things that you're automating, and eventually everything on the network will be handled, automated in the same way, using the same kind of workflow, using the same tooling.
Yep, which not begs the question, but which suggests that you have realistic expectations of what you're going to do with automation. Automation is really popular to talk about in blogs and podcasts and all these things. We're talking about it now, and for good reason. There's some benefit that we've discussed, but you do need to be realistic about it, especially in a brownfield environment, because the number of one-offs that you're going to come across, from my experience, just starts to you have a compiled list of one-offs that starts to break down the benefit of automating everything, because you're handling all these individual, like this one-off for this firewall over here. I have this one Juniper box. What do I have to create 72 scripts for this, but everything else is this other vendor. It starts to, so that doesn't negate the benefit of automation, but you have to have realistic expectations going in of, all right, let's, like Ethan said, automate this chunk of the network, this particular technology. And then moving forward, it reduces over time. But yeah, I've experienced having, as far as what didn't work, I'm looking at the question, what didn't work? What didn't work was having a high expectation and telling my boss very foolishly that I'm going to automate everything. And then I could not do that easily. And it took me a year of putzing around and copying and pasting other people's code to find out that this is nuts. I have 75 file folders on my desktop here.
Well, one last tip from my 2 cents is, don't expect you're going to Python your way through all of this and to get this done. That's not, scripts have their place. Python scripting, there's a lot of capability there, but that's not the way you want to tackle automation, in my opinion. You probably want a tool that's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. For example, we just saw one that does that. We've done some shows with Glueware and talked about them. They do so much for you, and they've already worked out the bugs in their process and so on, that if you can invest in a tool like that does what you need on your network, I would want to start there rather than thinking I'm going to Python the network to death. to to fix all the problems. I think of Python encoding as more of a special case because every script you write, you just create a technical debt. Every script you write, you've now got to keep up with when it breaks because you upgraded to a new version of iOS and now your script doesn't work anymore because reasons and so on. Leave that to a vendor if you can afford it. You're not, why do you think you need to spend all your time writing Python code? Because it's cool? Well, maybe it is cool and you like to do that, but do you really have time for that? If the goal of automation is to save time, I think there are tools out there that are worth looking at first, and then if they're not going to meet your needs, you don't have the budget, whatever the reasons are that you're not going to adopt those tools, and there's a lot of choices out there, then look at Python. I don't know that everybody agrees with me on that perspective, but go ahead, Karen.
If you're going to look at Python, though, you should look at things like DevNet and Stack Overflow and Paramiko versus NetMiko. So Google is your friend. What's the problem you're trying to solve? I agree with Phil that it should be pick a small thing. And so if you want to update NTP, fine. I know that Cisco has scripts for updating your image for this or that or this. And then look at them and see would they apply to you. And then practice on a lab or on a small part of the environment. Like, did it work? Can I do a second one? Can I do a third one? Blah, blah, blah. The automation, the hump to get into automation is that you're going to spend more time than you'll save for some period of time. What you're really hoping is that when you get it right, there'll be less mistakes that have to be troubleshot.
Big time investment up front to get it right. I completely agree with that.